Have you ever wondered why some people feel so deeply while others seem to move through the world untouched? Could it be that empathy is truly a virtue, or is it a curse disguised as nobility? And what if I told you that your sensitivity is not a spiritual gift, but a psychological scar that learned to smile? The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, said Carl Jung. But what happens when, from the very beginning, everything you are was shaped to keep others comfortable? When your very existence is reduced to the silent mission of feeling on behalf of others what they never wanted to feel themselves? If you are here, perhaps you have already noticed something unusual about the way you exist. Maybe you often feel drained without knowing why. Maybe you've spent your whole life apologizing for having needs. Maybe you carry an anger you don't know how to name, a fire burning within. Not because you hate others, but because for years you have forgotten yourself. This is not a hymn to the empath. It is a dissection, a ritual of clarity, a brutal yet necessary invitation to look in the mirror and face the question most people avoid. And what if my kindness were only a well-trained defense mechanism? Today, guided by the abyssal psychology of Carl Jung, we are going to explore the wound that gave birth to your way of feeling. We are going to pull apart what lies beneath your compassion and why it may be silently destroying you. You were not born empathic, you were born human. But at some point, and you might not even remember exactly when, your survival instinct was forced to transform into sensitivity, not because it was beautiful, but because it was necessary. Jung never romanticized empathy the way social media does today. He understood that many times a good heart is really a stifled cry. A child who learned too early that emotions were dangerous, that asking was risky, that taking up space was punishable. So that child learned the subtle art of disappearing, of feeling for others everything no one wanted to feel for them. Empathy for Jung often arises as a neurotic response, not a choice, but a mechanism, a shield disguised as an embrace, a prison disguised as love. Emotional hypervigilance is born not from evolution, but from survival. It becomes the embryo of what we call empathy in adulthood. But Jung gave it another name: premature adaptation of the ego. It happens when a child's psyche, pressured by an unstable environment, rushes ahead in its development. It learns codes it should not know. It becomes too mature, too soon. It transforms into the advisor, the shield, the healer, and in the process, disappears. Have you ever felt that no matter how much you give, how present you are, how tirelessly you help, no one takes care of you in the same way? That is the hidden root of neurotic empathy, the habit of giving as survival, not as generosity. You learned that love came with an emotional bill, that you were only valued when you did something for others, that caretaking was the safest way to avoid abandonment. You became an antenna, picking up pain, silences, and subtleties. But what about you? Who ever picked up on you? Jung said that the true tragedy is not having a shadow, but not knowing it exists. And in the empath, that shadow is made of rage, ego, and need. All the things you learned to repress to be accepted. Everything you call selfishness, but which is really your right to exist. How many times did you swallow your tears to avoid disturbing others? How many times did you bend yourself to someone's mood just to keep the peace? How many times did you say, "I'm fine," while silently begging for an embrace? Compulsive empathy is not a virtue. It is trauma refined. It is a soul that learned to survive by silencing itself. by loving excessively, by always yielding. And that kind of empathy comes with a heavy price. It costs you health, energy, and identity. It turns you into a useful ghost, always present, always invisible. And here lies the cruelest paradox. The empath suffers for feeling too much, yet fears stopping. Because if they stop, they believe love will vanish, the bond will break, and without sacrifice, they will be disposable. But Jung warns us, the soul needs truth more than peace. And the truth is that you do need to learn to be selfish, not vulgar, destructive, narcissistic selfishness, but what Jung called healthy narcissism, the capacity to recognize yourself as legitimate, to say no, to put yourself at the center of your own life without fear of being hated. The empath falls ill when they do not understand that being good does not mean erasing oneself, that true love demands boundaries, that compassion is not carrying others on your back, but extending your hand with both feet firmly on the ground. You do not need to save anyone. You need to stop abandoning yourself. How many times have you felt proud of being the one everyone turns to when they're broken? Now ask yourself, whom do you turn to when it is you who needs help? Do you see the imbalance between all you give and how little you allow yourself to receive? Deep down, you still believe love depends on your usefulness. You still hear that inner voice whispering, if I don't help, I'll be left behind. Jung called that conditional identity, a version of you created to satisfy the expectations of others, a golden cage where applause is endless but freedom non-existent. You are not merely empathic, you are trapped in a cycle of emotional self-denial. And the worst part is, the world applauds you. They call you generous, sensitive, with a huge heart. But no one sees the exhaustion. No one notices how much rage you swallow, how much frustration builds in silence, how often you dream of vanishing. All of it sinks into the shadow. Jung said, you do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It is time to bring that darkness to light, to recognize that your empathy is beautiful only when it is not born of guilt, not born of fear, not compulsive. You can be good, but only if you are good to yourself too. You can care, but not at the expense of your sanity. You can love, but only if you include yourself in that love. The hidden root of empathy is not generosity, it is survival. It is that child who never could be selfish, never could scream, never could demand, and so became someone who feels for everyone except themselves. But something within you is changing now. You are beginning to listen to yourself. You are tired of pleasing. For the first time, you are considering putting yourself first. And that is a revolution. Because as Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And you, dear empath, were not born to be the emotional backbone of a broken world. You were born to be whole, with light and shadow, with love and anger, with empathy and ego. To be good is not to die for others. To be good is to live for yourself, and then overflow. Now, there is something you need to know. Have you ever noticed that precisely when you most need to stay calm, your mind collapses? That loss of control is not only emotional, it is mental. It happens because most of us were trained to feel before thinking, to react before observing. The problem is structural. No one taught us to train the mind like a muscle. That is why every minor frustration becomes an explosion, and every challenge an inner defeat. But there is another way to operate, a structure based on neuroscience, applied philosophy, and silent mental techniques that reprogram the way you respond and return command to you. There are children who, even before learning to read, already master the invisible vocabulary of other people's emotions. They don't need anyone to say, "I'm sad." They feel it, they sense it, they anticipate it. They develop a kind of silent radar that detects the scream before the sound, the blow before the gesture, the disappointment before the word. These children are not magical, they are survivors. Carl Jung called this psychic antennas, a form of emotional hypersensitivity that arises when the family environment is not safe enough for the child to simply exist. They learn that the world around them is unpredictable, and that to survive, they must grow eyes where no one sees, ears where no one speaks, intuitions where logic cannot reach. They become emotional sentinels, not by choice, but because their integrity depends on it. Do you remember what it was like? Watching every step of your parents, deciphering their mood just by hearing a tiny shift in tone, walking carefully as if the floor were made of invisible glass, realizing that sometimes silence was more dangerous than shouting. The antenna child grows up believing their own feelings are dangerous. If they cry, they are called weak. If they laugh too loud, they are exaggerated. If they ask for attention, they are selfish. So they learn not to express themselves, and later, not even to feel. But here lies a cruel truth. When you silence your pain, your body keeps screaming, only from within. That child becomes the adult who picks up everything. The energy in the room, the unspoken pain of another, the tension carried in a glance. They become the friend who feels something is wrong, the partner who notices the mood shift, the worker who knows when the boss will explode. They become useful, even admired, but not for who they are, rather for how much they can adjust to others. Jung saw this as a profound imbalance, a socially accepted neurosis, because it shows up as generosity, empathy, altruism, but deep inside, it is a refined form of self-abandonment. You feel everything from everyone, all the time, except yourself. And do you know why? Because looking inward hurts more than absorbing the pain of the world. Because your own wound is too ancient, too heavy, ignored for too long, and terrifying to face. Jung called this inner disconnection a soul excision. It is when you specialize so much in feeling the other that you become a stranger to yourself. How many times have you found yourself in relationships where you were always the one who understood, the one who forgave, the one who explained their side? How many times did you justify emotional harm by saying, "They had a hard childhood," or "They don't know how to handle their feelings"? You are not compassionate. You were conditioned. You don't forgive with your heart. You forgive with guilt. You don't understand with empathy. You understand with fear. Fear of rejection if you demand respect. Fear of abandonment if you set boundaries. Fear of being called selfish if you dare to choose yourself. And here lies the psychic price of feeling too much. You stop being a self and become an extension of the other. You know what they want, feel, and need. But when someone asks you, "What do you want?" silence swallows you because you don't know. You became fluent at interpreting others, but illiterate about yourself. Jung said, "The soul cannot bear lies for too long." It begins to scream through anxiety, chronic exhaustion, repeated relationships, the feeling that something is wrong with me and I don't know what it is. That cry is often silenced with more empathy. You help more, you listen more, you carry more. But the truth is, you need a hug and no one ever gave it. You need to be seen, but not as the person who understands everyone. You need to be seen as someone who also needs understanding. And that terrifies the child who grew up praised for being mature, because breaking that role means breaking the identity built over a lifetime. But what if Jung was right? What if that identity is an illusion? What if you are not truly that endlessly empathetic, available, understanding person, but rather someone who learned to be that way, to survive in a world where being authentic was dangerous? You feel too much, not because you are enlightened, but because you were too exposed, too vulnerable, subtly abandoned. Your extreme sensitivity is, in truth, the trace of abandonment. It is the symptom of a childhood where you had to monitor the climate so you wouldn't be swallowed by the storm. Jung knew what that produced: repressed rage, fragmented self-esteem, hunger for recognition, unconscious attraction to emotionally unavailable people. You don't want to be loved. You desperately want to finally be enough. But for that, you will have to disappoint some people, the ones who grew accustomed to your docility, the ones who feed on your guilt, the ones who call change your first step toward freedom. You will have to abandon the role of antenna, and that is frightening, because deep down, you feel that if you are not useful, you will be discarded. But the truth Jung left us is different. You will never be whole as long as you are only the reflection of another. It is time to turn inward, to rescue the child who once learned that feeling for others was safer than being herself. She is still there, scared but alive, and she longs to be embraced not as a spiritual tool, not as an emotional warrior, but as what she always was, a human being who deserved to exist without fixing anyone. That is your task now, to sit with that child, to be with her in silence, to say, I no longer need to guess what others feel. Now I want to know what I feel. And when that inner voice begins to surface, fragile, doubtful, confused, listen to it. Listen with the same care you always gave to others. Listen as one who holds a broken mirror with steady hands and an open heart. Because you are not an antenna, you are a complete being, with history, with wounds, with a voice, and at last, with permission to use it. Every empath has a limit, and almost no one notices when that limit has been crossed, because they don't shout, they don't fight, they swallow it. But inside, there is a fire. Carl Jung warned us, everything we don't face within will appear outside as destiny. And perhaps that is the empath's destiny, to end up surrounded by people they themselves taught not to respect them, not out of cruelty, but out of habit, through a silent history of self-abandonment disguised as kindness. The empath, that apparently sweet, understanding, enlightened being, carries a heavy, throbbing shadow hidden beneath the cloak of goodness. And that shadow, dear one, is rage. Not loud rage, but ashamed rage. Rage that was never allowed to exist. Rage that learned to silence itself, to turn into it's fine, into it was nothing, into let it go, but that never forgets what was denied, stores it, and collects its debt. Jung said, the unconscious is timeless. What was not lived still pulses inside us, demanding passage, demanding existence. And in the case of the empath, what was not lived was the right to protect themselves, to say no, to stay, to leave, to have desires. Do you realize that your rage is always turned inward? You help too much and feel used, but you say nothing. You always give in and feel small, but you smile. You are the last to be heard, and still you thank for a listening that never came. How long? How long will you carry others' weight, believing it makes you better? That is not kindness. It is prison. Jung called this process shadow formation, by moral conditioning. It is when everything you feel, but that doesn't fit the ideal imposed on you, gets thrown into the depths of the soul. Rage, frustration, ego, desire, fatigue, all labeled ugly, wrong, selfish. But what happens to all that you repressed? It becomes symptom, turns into chest pain, becomes insomnia, becomes exhaustion, becomes chronic resentment, and sooner or later, it becomes explosion. The person who always said yes, one day screams. The one who always understood, one day cuts ties. The one who carried the world, one day drops everything, and no one understands why. How could you change? You were always so accessible. What a disappointment. A disappointment for whom? For those who got used to your silence? For those who projected the role of savior, therapist, parent onto you? Jung called this projective identification. People do not relate to you. They relate to the role you assumed. And when you start dismantling that role, they feel betrayed. But the truth is, you had already betrayed yourself when you accepted a part you never wanted to play. And here is the crucial point. That rage beating within you is legitimate. It is yours. It is sacred. It is life energy telling you, enough. Enough of swallowing it all. Enough of staying silent. Enough of justifying yourself for having human needs. You have the right to say no, to fail, to refuse to help, to choose your own well-being without giving explanations. The rage of the empath is not destructive. It is the vital signal of a soul tired of pretending docility. But before it can set you free, you need to look at it with new eyes, without fear, without shame. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious." And for the empath, that darkness is the repressed scream. It is the boundary never set. It is the life pushed aside so the other could be comfortable. Does it seem beautiful to give all of yourself? And you, what do you receive? Does it seem noble to always forgive? And who forgives you? Empathy without regulation becomes prison. You get lost in others' emotions and forget that you too have a heart that bleeds. How many times did you want to scream, "Enough," but only said, "It's okay"? How many times did you think, "And me," but kept smiling? That emotional repetition creates an existential void. You become an empty vessel, useful, functional, lovable, but empty. And that is why rage appears. It wants to wake you up, to remind you that you are still alive. Rage, deep down, is self-love that learned to wear armor. Do not run from it. Do not fear that fire. Learn to direct it. Jung spoke of the transcendent function, the psyche's capacity to unite opposites. In your case, empathy and boundary, kindness and firmness, sweetness and protection. That union is what he called the integration of the shadow. It is not about choosing between remaining good or becoming cold. It is about allowing yourself to be whole. You don't need to be less sensitive, but you do need to be more complete. The person you long to be, the one who loves without erasing themselves, who helps without destroying themselves, only emerges when you face your shadow and say, "I see you, I hold you, I release you." The rage of the empath is the fury of one who was never seen, who was used as an emotional anchor without ever being able to anchor in anyone, who carried the world's traumas on the fragile shoulders of a child who only wanted a hug. And do you know what the first step toward healing is? Saying no without guilt, without justifying yourself, without fearing the loss of a love that only existed while you denied yourself. The empath, in order to flourish, must frustrate expectations, must disappoint those accustomed to their submission, must break the cycle that held them captive, even the cycle within. Jung called this the courage to individuate, to become who you truly are, even if that means abandoning who you pretended to be. And that courage begins with one simple, radical act: choosing yourself. There comes a moment when the empath, the one who feels everything for everyone all the time, finally perceives an uncomfortable truth. No one asked you to sacrifice yourself, and yet you sacrificed for peace, for acceptance, for love, for a safe place in the world. But what did you get back? Silence, exhaustion, invisibility. It has been said that an unlived life is a sickness of the soul. And perhaps this is the silent illness of so many empaths, living halfway to sustain the image of someone who always says yes, someone who loves, helps, endures, even when everything inside begs for rest. Then a subtle moment arrives, sometimes almost imperceptible, when something breaks inside. An invisible thread that always kept the empath tied to the savior role snaps, and what follows is a void. Not the void of lacking, but the void of discovery. The discovery that you spent years being good out of fear, that your generosity was compulsive, that your capacity to listen to everyone was a way to silence yourself. You called it love, but it was an escape from rejection, from loneliness, from your own emotional complexity, an escape from the truth. A certain wise voice taught that the path toward healing begins with confrontation. And there is no confrontation tougher than this, realizing that sacrifice was never a choice. It was programming, conditioning, survival. Since childhood, you learned that your feelings were not a priority. You were the strong one, the mature one, the different one. You could not make mistakes, complain, or shout. You were praised for taking care of others. But nobody noticed that by doing so, you were stopping living. They shaped you to attend, not to be attended to listen, not to speak, to give, not to receive. And so a specific kind of prison is born, the prison of obligatory goodness. But here lies the secret many ignore. True altruism only arises from choice. When it comes from fear, it is only slavery under another name. So ask yourself now, honestly, without defenses. How many times did you say yes when you wanted to say no? How many times did you love someone who hurt you just to keep the connection? How many times did you put another's pain above your own and then cry in secret? This is where emotional authenticity is born, not as a pretty ideal or a theoretical concept, but as a cry of the soul, as an urgency, the urgency to stop lying to yourself. You no longer need to erase yourself to keep the peace. You no longer need to sacrifice yourself to be loved. You no longer need to hide your pain behind empathy. Emotional authenticity is born the exact moment you decide to stop being a character. It arises in the discomfort of disappointing others, in the pain of losing ties that only existed because you pretended not to have desires. It is born like any real birth, with pain, with blood, with rupture. And like every birth, it demands courage. Courage to look the one you love in the eyes and say, I can't keep abandoning myself to keep you close. That is not cruelty, it is psychic maturity. A certain psychological tradition calls this process the transcending of the persona, the social mask we use to be accepted. For the empath, that mask goes by names like good, understanding, strong, mature. But that mask suffocates. One teacher warned that the more perfect the mask, the more the soul is suffocated. So you have to choose. Will you keep being the functional empath, admired and exhausted? Or will you begin to build your true self, even if that brings twisted looks, accusations of selfishness, and the loss of some relationships. It is a choice, and perhaps for the first time, you are ready to make it. Emotional authenticity is like opening a window in a room where the air was already scarce. At first, the wind frightens you. You feel cold, dizzy, but little by little, you realize you can breathe. Breathe without needing to please. Breathe without calculating the emotional impact of every word. Breathe without being everyone's emotional consolation. Another teaching says, the authentic self is the one that integrates all rejected parts. And for the empath, one of those rejected parts is precisely the right to exist without guilt. You have the right to exist without justification, to have no energy, to change your mind, to care for yourself before caring for others. That is not selfishness. It is emotional justice. And there lies the key to transformation. Your empathy does not need to die. It simply needs to stop being compulsive and become a choice. You can keep feeling, but now with discernment. You can keep helping, but now with boundaries. You can keep loving, but now with roots. Emotional authenticity does not eliminate sensitivity. It sharpens it. It transforms empathy from a silent curse into a conscious gift and returns you to yourself. And in the end, perhaps what the old teachers most wanted to show is that individuation is in truth a return, not to the person others expect you to be, but to the one you always were before you learned to hide. Sacrifice or choice. You no longer have to die for anyone. Now you can be born for yourself. There comes a point when you look at everything you built and realize that much of your life was shaped not by desire, but by duty. Friends you maintained to avoid hurting someone. Relationships you held together to avoid disappointing. Family you tolerated in silence, while inside you died a little at each gathering. You called that love, but it might be a neurotic adaptation, the version of yourself you manufactured to be loved, even if that meant disappearing. This chapter is about return, not the shallow, essential self sold by coaches, but the center of gravity of your psyche, sovereignty. A maxim says, "He who looks outward dreams, he who looks inward wakes." Waking for the empath means realizing that your gift only becomes power when it's freed from the obligation to save the world. The empath was not born to be a martyr. They were born to be whole. But how to achieve that when everything, absolutely everything, pushes you back into the caregiver role? When your identity was built on the idea that your value lies in being useful, sensitive, sacrificial. Start with rupture. The rupture that at first seems selfishness, but gradually reveals itself as courage. Courage to choose yourself. Courage to disappoint. Courage to be unavailable all the time. Courage to be clear, even when that causes silence. Courage to have needs, to be inconvenient, to be real. Some call this psychic differentiation. The moment you understand, I am not others. I am not what they expect of me. I am an autonomous universe, and that universe has its own laws, limits, desires. It has yes and no. From this point, the empath's journey changes direction. They stop functioning as an emotional thermometer of their surroundings and begin to be an axis. Someone who feels, yes, but chooses what to do with what they feel. Someone who loves, but who also loves themselves. This new empath is what some would call individuated, no longer driven by an unconscious need to repair, but propelled by the conscious strength of simply existing. They learn that not every pain is theirs to carry. Not every story deserves their ear. Not every request demands an answer. For someone who lived as a reflection, this is liberating but also painful, because it requires breaking invisible contracts with those who grew used to using them as an emotional crutch. You will disappoint people. You will be accused of having changed. You will hear that you are distant, cold, strange. But remember, those words come from those who benefited from your lack of boundaries, from those who confused empathy with servitude. And here is the most powerful twist. The relationships that survive your sovereignty are the only ones that deserve to remain. This phenomenon is relational recalibration. Dynamics reorganize, fragile ties break, true bonds deepen, and finally you realize it wasn't you who was hard to love. It was your relationships that were too superficial to hold your depth. That is the beauty of emotional sovereignty. You stop begging for spaces that crush you and begin to inhabit spaces that expand you. But beware, sovereignty has a price. You will no longer have excuses. You will no longer be able to say, "I did it because they forced me." You must own your decisions, your absences, your presence, your silence. And many retreat here because it is easier to keep saving others than to face the void of not knowing who you are without that function. It's more comfortable to remain the pleasant one than to be the selfish person who prioritizes their mental health. But you already know, every comfort that demands your absence is a kind of emotional suicide. So choose the discomfort of presence, the weight of truth, the nakedness of authenticity. You don't have to be the hero, the mirror, or the eternal shoulder. You can simply be you, flawed with desires, contradictions, intensity, and rest. Another wise teaching said, "True freedom is born when you accept your wholeness." And the empath's wholeness does not reside only in their light, but also in their shadow, in their fatigue, in their anger, in their silence. Sovereignty is not a permanent state of balance. It is the capacity to hold yourself without needing external applause to feel complete. You are not responsible for everyone, nor for the world's moods, nor for the wounds of those who refuse to heal. Your greatest responsibility now is to yourself, and paradoxically, when you choose yourself, you are finally able to choose others with more truth, without guilt, without dependence, without effort. You help because you want to, not because you need to. You listen because you have the energy, not because you are obliged. You love because you overflow, not because you beg for acceptance. That is sovereignty. And for the empath, that is rebirth. So breathe deeply. You are not betraying anyone. For the first time, you are being loyal to yourself. And that, my dear, is the true miracle of conscious empathy. At the end of everything, when the night is more honest than any daytime words, a question arises we can no longer sweep under the emotional rug. And when will someone care for me? Maybe you spent your life being someone's shoulder, the emotional anchor for many. Maybe you learned that loving is caring, serving, offering, even emptying yourself completely. And everyone applauds you for that. They call it compassion, generosity, a gift. But a brutally honest perspective offers a different view. Not all empathy is virtue. Sometimes it is only the scar of a childhood in which you had to feel for everyone because no one was willing to feel for you. The empath is not born only with a big heart. They are formed in environments where their own heart had to shape itself to others' pain to avoid disappearing. Environments where they learned that being loved requires effort, that existing means being useful, that others' silence must be filled with their constant listening. You became a mirror, a cure, a crutch. By so much reflecting, you forgot your own face. But now something has moved within you. perhaps imperceptibly, like the first tremor before an earthquake, perhaps as a subtle discomfort, a different tiredness, a need to no longer be available, and for the first time, not feel guilty about it. That is the seed of your individuation. This process of becoming who you are does not arrive as illumination, but as crisis. You don't wake up one day feeling free. You collapse, you abandon the character, you break the armor, and you allow the true self, the one you left behind to fit in, to finally return. But that self returns with demands. It no longer wants to be useful. It wants to be free. It wants to love without begging. It wants to give without emptying. It wants to be without having to save anyone. And that is where everything begins to reorganize. Relationships dissolve, patterns break, and you hear for the first time phrases like, "You're different. You're not the same." Have you become more selfish? Perhaps your response may be a silent smile, because now you understand. It isn't selfishness, it is sovereignty. You're not abandoning anyone, you've simply stopped abandoning yourself. For the first time, you can see that the cries you heard in others' emotions were echoes of your own drowned voice. We are warned that the shadow, that forgotten part of the soul, is not a villain. It is the part of you you had to bury to be accepted. In the empath's case, the shadow is made of will, of a legitimate rage, of tiredness, of boundaries never expressed, of desires that never had permission to exist. And now, that shadow no longer wants to be hidden. It wants to be integrated. You don't need to heal by becoming less sensitive. You need to heal by becoming more authentic. Because deep down, healing is not becoming another person. Healing is stopping the pretense. You will still feel a lot, but now you will choose who deserves access to your feeling. You will still love, but now you will know when that love begins to hurt you. You will still help, but not to be loved, because you overflow. Finally, you understand that true empathy is not the kind that makes you vanish. It is the kind that is born of your wholeness. And do you know the most beautiful part? You no longer need to explain yourself. You can simply exist with presence, depth, silence, and choice. And if the world keeps telling you you've changed, you look in the mirror, perhaps with tears, and whisper, "Yes, at last I have." For the privilege of a life is to become who you really are. If you've made it this far, perhaps you already feel it in your flesh. You're no longer trying to win the world's love. You are finally learning to love yourself enough to choose where and with whom you wish to remain whole. And now the remaining question is not how to please others, but what keeps me alive. I needed to write this script with the lights off, truly, like talking to someone in the dead of night, not to teach or to convince, but because something inside needed to be heard too. For years I was that person described here. The empath, understanding, reliable, the one who listened to everyone, helped everyone, and returned home with a tiredness no bed could cure, would say, "It's okay, even with pain that wasn't mine." You swallowed offenses as if swallowing guilt. You truly believed that putting others first was a way of being good. But there was a night, one of those nights no one posts on social media, when you collapsed in your bathroom without an audience, without a pretty speech, without a rational explanation. You simply broke. It was then you understood what individuation meant. It is not a pretty process. It is visceral, solitary, like tearing off a mask that had become skin. And if you are listening now, perhaps you have already lived your own broken dawn. Or maybe you are on the verge of it. Whatever the case, I thank you deeply for allowing yourself to feel this video, for not fleeing from the words that hurt, for walking with me between lucidity and delirium. Your empathy is not weakness. It simply needs to be a choice, not a sentence. Perhaps today you will say your first no without guilt. Maybe tomorrow you'll say, I need to, without shrinking. Or maybe you will simply breathe deeply, close your eyes, and for the first time feel, I deserve to care for myself. If that happens, if a single line from this video turns into action in your life, then every word was worth it. If you've made it this far, chances are you have a habit of sticking around, even when things probably lasted longer than they should have. Maybe you've lingered in draining conversations, unhealthy relationships, or repetitive patterns that refuse to break. But for now, let yourself become both the closing chapter and the first page of something brand new. And hey, if after watching this, you decide not to comment, subscribe, or hit like, that's perfectly okay. I'll just take it as a sign of your kindness. No added expectations for me to carry. But if you feel called to join me in this slightly wild, thoughtful adventure, you know how to show your support. Give this video a thumbs up, share your thoughts below, subscribe, or send this along to a friend who always seems cheerful but quietly bears the world alone. As for the two videos on your screen, one might send you spiraling into your next profound reflection, and the other could be the lifeline you didn't know you needed. You'll only know if you give them a shot. I'll catch you on the next deep dive, or maybe during one of those late nights when pretending everything's fine gets exhausting. Until then, remember, treat yourself with the same tenderness you've always offered to others. And what if I told you that death is not the end, but the only possible beginning of an authentic life? We exist as if time were an endless resource. We postpone conversations that would mend us, delay decisions that would free us, and tuck our dreams away in a drawer labeled someday. Yet there is one truth that does not negotiate. You will die, and you do not know when. This is not a morbid lecture, but a summons, an existential alarm that rings to wake you from the automatic. Carl Jung, one of the most probing minds of the 20th century, taught that death is not an accident outside of us, but an intrinsic horizon that defines who we are. To be human is, in a deep sense, to be toward death. That orientation is not a dark fate to fear. It is the frame that gives life its proportion. Most of us behave as if death was someone else's problem. We stock our lives with small comforts and public appearances while the inner life erodes from disuse. But death is not an RSVP we can ignore. It arrives unscheduled and without permission. Jung insisted that the person who learns to face death ceases to be a slave to fear, a slave to the habits of the crowd, a slave to distraction. This recognition does not shrink life. It enlarges it because it clarifies what matters. Ask yourself, are you merely passing the time, or are you spending it? There is a difference. Passing the time is movement without direction. Spending time is an act of allocation, a moral economy where each moment is invested in something that matters to your soul. If you begin to perceive your days as a finite currency, what do you prioritize? Whom do you call? Which dream do you dust off and lean into? Jung did not invite us to obsess over death, but to hold it as a constant companion, a whisper behind our choices that keeps them honest. This whisper is subtle. It surfaces in the sudden clarity after loss, in the urgency that follows an unexpected diagnosis, in the small rebellions we postpone because we fear the unknown. To let that whisper guide you is to allow life to be sharpened by its own limits. Imagine an invisible hourglass you carry everywhere. Nobody can see how many grains have fallen and how many remain. The opacity of its measure is both terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because it refuses to be controlled. Liberating precisely because the measure is unknowable, every moment becomes an opportunity for meaning. Each grain that drops cannot be retrieved. What will you have used it for? To build connection, to cultivate courage, or to cushion your days with avoidance? When we flee from the thought of death, we throw a veil over the essential. We become conformists to a script not written by our hands. We take on identities offered by family, culture, or market forces, and then call them our own. This is what Jung called inauthenticity, living a life assembled from external parts until the whole no longer fits. Authenticity, in contrast, begins where denial ends. It begins when you accept that non-existence is possible, and let that acceptance inform the way you live. It means refusing to let the standard measures of success, applause, salary, approval, decide the worth of your days. It means asking instead, what does my depth require? What does my conscience ask me to honor now? Such choices are rarely dramatic. Often they are small, stubborn acts of fidelity. Speaking a truth you have softened into silence, leaving a job that erodes your center, forgiving someone when bitterness has calcified your heart, or finally, engraving time in the calendar for the work that whispers to you at night. These are not theatrical gestures. They are the quiet rebellions of a life waking up. Consider the stories of ordinary people who began to take death seriously and were thereby reborn. A teacher who retired early to write, a mother who learned to say no and found time to read, a son who reconciled with an estranged father before it was too late. None of these acts require grandeur, only presence. Presence is the currency death values most. To live toward death is to embrace responsibility, not as a burden, but as a liberation. Responsibility here means the courage to choose where you place your attention, how you allow others to shape you, and how you answer the call of your deepest inclinations. You become responsible not only for the life you present to the world, but for the inner architecture that holds you upright. There is also tenderness in this posture. When you remember that your time is limited, relationships alter their texture. Calls that once felt optional become urgent. Small kindnesses gain weight. You learn to listen without rehearsing a reply, to forgive because the ledger of grievances feels too heavy for a limited life, to hold another's hand without counting the minutes wasted. Death teaches you the economy of love. It is measured not in tokens, but in attention. Jung spoke often of individuation, the process by which a person becomes the most honest version of themselves. Facing death accelerates individuation because it presses you to choose your own contours. You are invited to separate what is yours from what is borrowed, to integrate shadow parts you have rejected, and to build a life congruent with an inward calling rather than an outward script. But beware, this is not a call to isolation or nihilism. On the contrary, the acknowledgement of mortality often deepens our ties to the community. Knowing our days are finite can inspire us to contribute, to risk intimacy, and to create works, small or large, that outlast fleeting comforts. When life is lived with eyes open to its limit, it develops a strength and generosity that the complacent cannot know. If you are troubled by anxiety at the thought of death, you are not alone. Many thinkers, from Yalom to Kierkegaard, have documented the paradox. Awareness of death can produce despair, but it can also produce meaning. The task is not to eliminate fear, impossible and unnecessary, but to transform it into fuel. Let the dread of an end become the energy to begin. How to begin, practically? Start by inventorying what you do in a week and ask, does this align with my values? Use small experiments. Block an hour a week to pursue the thing that scares you. Call the person you have been postponing. Say a true sentence. Keep a short journal of what felt honest each day. These are modest practices with powerful cumulative effects. They orient you, bit by bit, toward a life that will withstand the honesty of its own ending. And when grief arrives, as it often does, allow it its space. Grief is not a detour from life, but a proof of depth. It confirms that you have loved and been loved, that your attachments mattered. Jung taught that our wounds are not signs of failure, but maps to transformation. Mourning can be a school. It teaches you how to hold loss without letting it petrify you. Ultimately, to accept that death walks with you is to accept the profound dignity of human limitation. It is to know that the edges of life are not defects, but defining lines. They give contrast to color and meaning to story. In the horizon of death, each choice becomes a line drawn with intention. So, will you live as if you have all the time in the world? Or will you let the reality of finite time shape the way you breathe, speak, and move? The difference is not trivial. One path leads to accumulation and avoidance, the other to presence and generosity. This is an invitation, not a verdict. Let the awareness of death be a threshold through which you step into fuller living. Let it be the hand that guides you back to your true calling. The last thing you owe the world is an honest life. If death is inevitable, then let your answer be that you chose, with courage and clarity, how you would spend the grains of your invisible hourglass. Death is not the enemy of life. It is its boundary, its outline, the silent force that grants it shape and urgency. Without death, life would dissolve into formlessness, just as a painting without lines would lose its vigor, its balance, its beauty. And here lies the essential question. Are you truly living the life that belongs to you, or merely following the script that others have written for you? We avoid this question. We avoid its weight, because to face it means to remember our own finitude. And so, we numb ourselves with routines, with endless tasks, with promises that never materialize. And in that haze, we drift further from the awareness of being alive. We live in a time where noise surrounds us on every side, constant notifications, endless goals, demands that multiply without end. Each day, we throw ourselves into a current of occupations we rarely choose, and within that relentless flow, something vital begins to fade, the conscious awareness of existence itself. Carl Jung described this as humanity's refusal to face the inner truth, the quiet avoidance of our deepest essence, not because of stupidity or cruelty, but because we fear the vertigo that comes with the memory that we will die. And so, we hide. We fill our schedules, we drown in distractions, we escape into 1,000 obligations. We become so occupied that we abandon our own existence. Perhaps you have felt it, that uncanny sensation that each day is but a repetition of the last, that beneath the surface of activity lies a silenced voice, something essential buried under layers of routine. That silence is not peace. It is existential numbness. It is the fog that covers your choices, your relationships, your desires. It makes you follow a pre-written script. Study, work, earn, consume. And because this fog is subtle, it doesn't wound at first. On the contrary, it feels comfortable, even safe, even celebrated. It is easier to sleepwalk through existence than to face the truth that time is slipping away. Yet death is real, and time is not infinite. The more we deny this, the more estranged we become from ourselves. Jung reminded us that life cannot be fully embraced without death. And yet, how often are we present? How often do we stop running long enough to inhabit silence? Our culture is terrified of silence. Social media, consumerism, the relentless rush, all are ways to avoid the uncomfortable question that waits in stillness. Am I truly living? By denying death, we also deny life. By refusing to think about the end, we refuse to ask whether our actions hold meaning. And that refusal, though easier in the moment, carries a devastating cost. One day, the fog lifts, but sometimes it is already too late. Time and again, existential psychology shows that crisis, loss, or proximity to death awakens people to truths they had ignored. They suddenly see with clarity that life is urgent. Not urgent because one must rush, but because the essential cannot be postponed forever. Ignoring death does not stop it. It only delays the awakening. To live with greater love, with greater clarity, with greater intention, you must face the certainty of your own ending. Awakening hurts, but remaining asleep can cost you your entire life. And yet, even knowing that we will die is often not enough. Sometimes we must brush against that edge, confront that limit, to recognize what truly matters. Radical moments, raw, disorienting, transformative, can tear us out of comfort and return us to urgency. They force us to stop pretending. They reveal the truth. People rarely regret not having worked more, not having earned more money. What they regret is not having lived authentically. Jung pointed again and again to the suffering born from betraying one's inner truth. Still, many postpone the life they yearn for, hiding in the illusion that more time will always come. Why do we do this? Studies with terminal patients reveal that what they most feared was not death itself, but reaching it without ever having lived. The terror was drifting through life as a distracted spectator, never diving into its depth, never choosing fully, never loving completely, never daring to say yes to what ignited their soul. Research in psychology confirms this as well. When we remember our mortality, we are drawn into authenticity, into deeper connections, into living with greater purpose. When death becomes real in the mind, false obligations lose their grip. The shoulds collapse. What is superficial fades. What is essential emerges with burning clarity. These awakenings are profoundly human. Again and again, the pattern repeats, the break from inertia, the moment when fear transforms into momentum instead of paralysis. Tragedy is not required for this awakening, but decision is. Each of us must decide, remain asleep or awaken to our true being. You do not need to wait for a diagnosis or a loss to wake up. You can begin now, in this very moment, with a single act of deep awareness. Your time is limited. Every passing minute vanishes forever. That remembrance alone can change how you speak, how you love, how you choose. The stories of those who awakened are not just meant to move us. They are invitations. They call us to confront what matters before the chance disappears. You do not need tragedy to live intentionally. You need only the courage to remember that you can choose. Awakening is not the end. It is the beginning. For once you awaken, you must decide what to do with that clarity. To live authentically is not a slogan. It is not a lifestyle trend. It is a radical demand, a lifelong challenge. Authenticity means responsibility. It means choosing, renouncing, rebuilding. Jung taught that authenticity arises when the individual ceases to dissolve into the collective, when you stop living according to the dictates of they, how they tell you to succeed, how they define love, how they measure worth. When you let yourself be carried by they, you live as a stranger to yourself, often without realizing it. To live authentically is to take your life into your own hands, to assume that no one else can live it for you, to recognize that your story is not rehearsed. It is unfolding in real time. And authenticity is not reckless indulgence. It is not doing whatever you want without consequence. It is the commitment to live in coherence with your deepest truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable or inconvenient. It means choosing from within, not from fear of judgment. It means deciding without guarantees, embracing risk, daring to be yourself even when it costs you comfort, status, or security. This is the challenge of life, to face death, not as an enemy, but as the force that calls you to live fully, to burn with the intensity of being alive before the flame is extinguished. We are condemned to be free, as Carl Jung would remind us, and that condemnation is not a punishment, but a profound responsibility. Freedom is heavy because it strips away excuses. It removes the comfort of blaming fate, society, or other people for the way we live. It pushes us into a raw confrontation with ourselves, with the choices we make each day, and with the silent question, are we truly living, or are we merely being lived by the forces around us? Authentic living begins when you recognize that freedom is not about doing whatever you please, but about becoming deeply aware of who you are beneath the noise of the world. Jung often spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you were always meant to be. This journey is neither quick nor easy. The world constantly tempts you to follow paths that do not belong to you. Expectations of family, demands of society, the seduction of approval, and the fear of rejection. And yet, every time you abandon yourself, a part of your soul goes silent. To live authentically means learning to listen again. It means saying no when something suffocates your spirit, even if that no creates conflict. It means daring to say yes to the callings that awaken fear, because behind fear lies growth. Each day becomes an invitation to ask yourself, does this action draw me nearer to my essence, or does it lead me further away? Authenticity is not about perfection, nor about crafting an image others will admire. It is about vigilance, about remaining awake to the ways you betray or honor yourself, moment by moment. There will be times when you notice you have strayed, times when you realize you are wearing a mask, pleasing others at the expense of your soul. In those moments, authenticity is the courage to pause, to turn around, and to begin again. It is giving yourself permission to evolve, to shift direction, to rewrite the meaning of your life without apology. Jung believed that the self is never static. It is a living force that demands renewal, and so authenticity is never finished. It is a continuous practice, a rhythm of losing and finding yourself again and again. Authenticity is not something displayed on a stage. It is lived quietly, deeply, embodied in the choices that no one else sees. It is not a performance, but a devotion. And though humble, it carries immense power. Because when you live from this place, you touch others, not with what you say, but with what you are. You leave an imprint of truth, that outlives you. You did not come here to mimic, to repeat, to follow a script written by others. You came to create. And creation demands fierce loyalty to what is alive inside you. Do not wait for the world to validate you. Do not wait for the perfect moment, or for every sign to align. Life never grants certainty, only possibility. So choose. Take a step, even if it trembles, then take another. Authenticity is rarely about grand gestures. It is often about protecting a small flame. Your flame, the one that insists on burning even when everything around you collapses. That flame is your essence, your truth, and your task is to guard it. And at the end of this journey, when you stand before death, there will be a final question waiting. Will you meet death with trembling fear, or with the quiet peace of knowing you lived by your own choice? Death is not waiting far away. It is already watching you, already present in each breath. The real question is whether you are willing to look back at it, to live fully in its gaze, and to let it sharpen your awareness of life. To live with the awareness of death is not to live in despair. It is to live urgently, intentionally, courageously. To remember that you will die is not a dark act, but the most luminous act of love you can offer your own existence. Because when you embrace mortality, every moment becomes sacred. Time stops being something to waste and becomes something to honor. You do not need to wait for illness, for loss, for crisis, to wake up. You can choose now. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Cut away what dims your spirit. Protect what ignites your inner fire. Make space for your voice, your presence, your life. You do not need to be perfect. You need to be real. And if, while listening to this, something moved inside you, if a thought stirred, if a feeling rose, do not ignore it. Write it down, share it, live it, because these sparks are the seeds of transformation, and if you hold on to them, they will grow. So ask yourself, what feels most urgent to release right now? What burden no longer belongs to you? What truth is asking to be spoken? Do not let the moment pass. Begin here, begin now. And if your path is to continue exploring philosophy as an inner compass, remember that you are not alone. Here, we keep awakening together. Within you lies a dormant force, one that has been waiting in silence, patient and still, yearning to be unleashed the moment you find the courage to release the pain you've been carrying for so long. That pain, once your constant companion, becomes a veil that dims your inner light, a weight that holds back the truth of who you really are. But the moment you begin to let it go, even slightly, that dormant power begins to stir, gently at first, then more boldly as you make space for something far greater: self-love. True self-love is not some far-off, untouchable ideal. It is not reserved for those who live without flaws or who have never known struggle. Instead, it rises from the depths of your being, the moment you stop fighting your inner pain and start embracing it, not as your enemy, but as your teacher. Carl Jung once taught that pain, when brought into the light of awareness, becomes a guiding force, leading us not toward despair, but toward the wholeness of who we are meant to be. Letting go of pain does not mean ignoring it or pretending it was never there. It means facing it with the quiet strength of acceptance. It means sitting with it, understanding its roots, and giving yourself permission to stop letting it define your story. Through this courageous process, something remarkable begins to happen. Self-love is no longer just a word. It becomes a living energy that begins to flow through you. You realize that it was never about being perfect or seeking approval. It was always about remembering your worth. This is not a superficial confidence. It's not based on achievements, appearance, or praise from others. It's something deeper, a state of being where you see yourself, all of yourself, and still choose to honor the person you are. When the pain begins to dissolve, it opens the door to a freedom you may have never known. And from that freedom, something extraordinary emerges, a relationship with yourself rooted in compassion, presence, and authenticity. As you continue releasing the pain that once bound you, a subtle yet powerful transformation begins to unfold. You start shedding the layers of judgment and self-criticism that clouded your vision. The harsh inner voice that once told you weren't enough starts to soften. In its place, a new voice arises, one that speaks with kindness, one that lifts you up instead of tearing you down. In this space of radical compassion for your own humanity, self-love is no longer a vague concept. It becomes a felt experience, changing the way you think, feel, and act. The liberation from suffering becomes a bridge, a passage into a higher frequency of being. In this new vibration, peace and authenticity are not occasional visitors. They are your natural state. The inner dialogue shifts. The words you speak to yourself carry gentleness and wisdom. Judgment fades. The inner critic loses its power. Your inner world becomes a sanctuary, and your own voice becomes your greatest ally. This new relationship with yourself becomes the fertile ground upon which a meaningful life can be built. And from that solid foundation, your external world begins to shift as well. The more deeply at peace you are with yourself, the more you begin to attract connections that mirror that same peace. Relationships rooted in mutual respect, honesty, and presence. You become a magnet for authenticity, and your very presence begins to change the energy of the spaces you enter. This healthy, vibrant energy field that surrounds you is the living proof of the transformation that occurs when pain is released and love is allowed in. And with that love comes something else: freedom from needing constant validation. You no longer look to others to tell you that you matter. You feel it from within. You know it. Your worth becomes unshakable, independent of circumstances or opinions. This is a quiet kind of power, a sacred confidence, one that does not shout, but speaks with calm certainty. It is the kind of power that allows you to walk through uncertainty with grounded grace, to stand firm even when the ground beneath you trembles. Releasing inner pain is not just an act of healing. It is a profound rebirth, a reawakening to your truest nature. In that rebirth lies the real power of self-love, a force without boundaries, a light that walks with you as you step fully into your life. As you rise from this inner liberation, your entire energy field transforms. You're no longer tethered to old patterns of self-doubt, shame, or fear. Instead, you begin to flow with a natural harmony, one that seeps into every area of your life. This vibrational renewal acts like a magnet, attracting people and experiences that are aligned with your authenticity. A beautiful cycle begins, one of growth, expansion, and aligned living. And as this energy continues to grow, so too does your capacity for forgiveness, not only toward others, but toward yourself. This kind of forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened or dismissing your feelings. It's about releasing yourself from the grip of emotional burdens that no longer serve you. It's about reclaiming your power. With every emotional knot you untangle, self-love takes deeper root, nourishing your confidence and fortifying your sense of self-worth. A profound coherence begins to emerge between what you feel, what you think, and what you do. This internal harmony leads to external clarity. Your decisions become more aligned, your actions more intentional, and life begins to reflect that alignment back to you in the form of synchronicities, opportunities, and relationships that support your soul's expansion. And yet this journey towards self-love is not a destination. It's a commitment, a conscious daily practice of choosing yourself. It's about tuning in, paying attention, offering kindness, and tending to your inner world like a sacred garden. In this space of unconditional love for yourself, you discover a freedom that no one else can give you, a freedom to be wholly and unapologetically you. This freedom is the root of a fulfilling life. In its presence, joy and peace cease to be fleeting. They become constant companions on your path. The power that rises from within when you release your pain is nothing short of revolutionary. It is the power to live from your truth, to reclaim the wholeness that has always been yours. This freedom redefines everything: how you see yourself, how you move through the world, and what you choose to allow into your life. You no longer need others to complete you. You no longer chase temporary circumstances to feel secure. You are the anchor. You are the peace. And the confidence that comes from this deep self-love is not loud or boastful. It's steady. It's calm. It holds you steady even in life's most turbulent storms. It becomes the voice that says, "You are safe. You are whole. You are enough." And with this new way of being, you begin to set boundaries, not out of fear, but out of love. Boundaries that protect your energy and honor your truth. Boundaries that create space for the kind of life and the kind of love you truly deserve. You learn to say no without guilt and to prioritize your well-being without fear. You begin to understand that loving yourself is not an act of selfishness. It's the very foundation upon which genuine love for others is built. It is only when you honor your own needs, your limits, and your truth that you are truly capable of offering love that is free, honest, and unburdened by resentment or expectation. This kind of self-love, born from a process of inner healing, becomes a gateway to an infinite well of creativity, clarity, and purpose. When you release the mental and emotional weight once occupied by pain and unresolved wounds, you clear a sacred space within yourself. And in that space, something powerful begins to emerge. New dreams, inspirations, and inner callings that resonate deeply with your soul's truest desires. Your mind becomes more open, your heart more receptive. This alignment with your inner truth strengthens your intuition, guiding you with more ease toward choices that nourish your body, mind, and spirit. Slowly, almost quietly, life begins to feel more authentic, less like something you're surviving, and more like something you're creating with intention. The energy you emit from this state of wholeness becomes magnetic. It speaks a silent language that others can feel without words. It draws in experiences, people, and opportunities that uplift and energize you, because they are now aligned with your true self. Releasing inner pain and cultivating self-love is not merely a personal achievement. It is a quiet revolution, one that transforms not only your inner landscape, but also the way you engage with the world around you. It's a threshold into a life of peace, fulfillment, and truth, a sacred gift that can only arise when you dare to turn inward, to face yourself with honesty, and to love what you find without condition. As the inner noise quiets, a different version of you begins to emerge, one that no longer needs to hide behind masks, defenses, or coping strategies. What remains is a calm, authentic presence that no longer depends on external validation or chaos to define its worth. From that place, every step you take is infused with a quiet truth, one that can be felt more than explained. This authenticity allows you to fully inhabit the present moment in a way that was once unfamiliar. The past no longer imprisons you, and the future no longer frightens you. You begin to live here, in the now, with the peaceful certainty of someone who knows that they are already enough, without needing to be perfect, fixed, or proven. That deep recognition becomes the seed of a more conscious, liberated life. And from that seed, something rare and beautiful grows: resilience. But not the hard, rigid kind, not the one born of endurance or resistance. This resilience is soft, but unshakable. It's the kind that can bend without breaking, hold without clinging, and stand without forcing. It is the quiet strength of someone who knows how to move through pain without becoming it. You learn that pain is not a prison, it's a passage. And as you move through it with compassion rather than fear, you begin to understand yourself on levels previously unknown. This self-love becomes a mirror through which your perception of others also shifts. You no longer see through the lens of your wounds. Instead, you see people more clearly, with fewer projections and more understanding. Empathy grows not from neediness, but from a deeper knowing that every soul is walking its own sacred journey, often carrying pain we cannot see. The process of releasing pain becomes a doorway to a more integrated way of living. You stop searching for pieces of yourself in other people because you no longer believe you are incomplete. You remember that your wholeness was never lost. It was only buried beneath layers of fear and forgetting. This realization is fertile ground for the blooming of a new kind of self-love, one that does not demand or cling, one that does not fear or compete. It simply is, and in its quiet existence, it transforms everything it touches. The self-love that arises from the letting go of pain becomes a powerful, guiding presence, not loud or demanding, but constant, steady. It reminds you of your inherent worth, even in your moments of doubt or despair. This inner strength urges you to care for yourself with both tenderness and conviction. You learn to set boundaries, not as walls to keep others out, but as sacred lines that protect your peace and allow your energy to flourish. The peace born from this acceptance frees you from the exhausting chase of external approval. It connects you to a quiet, rooted confidence that doesn't waver with circumstances. With this newfound stability, you begin to walk toward your dreams with certainty. Not because you're guaranteed success, but because you now understand that your value isn't tied to outcomes or applause. You walk forward because you are aligned, because you are ready, and because you trust yourself. This authentic love for yourself also transforms the way you connect with others. Relationships begin to reflect the inner harmony you've cultivated. You attract connections based on mutual respect, honesty, and authenticity, not out of need, but out of shared purpose. Interactions are no longer a means to fill emotional voids. They become sacred exchanges where two whole beings meet, support, and grow together. The vibration of self-love doesn't stay contained. It ripples outward. It touches everything you do, everyone you meet. It's reflected in the quality of your work, the depth of your creativity, and the way your presence influences your environment. Living from this place is a daily invitation to celebrate the miracle of being alive, to show up each day, not just to survive, but to express, to connect, to evolve. It is the gift that emerges when you finally release the suffering that never truly belonged to you and open your heart to the love that's been waiting patiently within you all along. And in that opening, something sacred happens. You begin to relate to your emotions not as enemies, but as messengers. Each feeling, even the uncomfortable ones, becomes a doorway to deeper awareness. You stop resisting them, and instead, you listen. Your emotions begin to teach you, to guide you, to reveal parts of yourself that longed to be seen. This conscious relationship with your inner world creates emotional stability and equips you with the wisdom to navigate life's inevitable highs and lows with grace. As you become more grounded in your worth and rooted in love, limiting beliefs begin to dissolve. Beliefs that once told you you weren't enough, or that love had to be earned through suffering. They fade because they no longer match the truth you've uncovered within. The inner voices that once questioned your worth begin to fade in the face of the undeniable truth of your authenticity and inherent dignity. This mental and emotional renewal sets you free to act from a place of personal power and inner alignment. The impact of this transformation extends to every area of your life, from how you care for your body and mind to how you choose your actions, your relationships, and your aspirations. Living with self-love means cultivating a lifestyle that honors your holistic well-being, supporting habits and choices that nourish and strengthen you on every level. This love for yourself, born from the release of pain, also connects you to a deeper sense of purpose. As you begin to see yourself as a worthy and complete being, you align with the frequencies that draw opportunities and experiences reflecting that internal wholeness. Life becomes a mirror that reflects your inner growth and invites you to expand further on this path of healing and self-discovery. Each step becomes an invitation to explore the truth of your being more deeply, embracing both the light and the shadow with equal love. The self-love that emerges from letting go of suffering becomes the firm foundation upon which you build a life of authenticity, meaning, and infinite possibility. That deep connection to your inner truth becomes a beacon, illuminating the way toward a more authentic and fulfilling existence. The clarity that rises from releasing inner pain allows you to recognize and honor your true needs, desires, and boundaries, establishing a balance that sustains your emotional and spiritual well-being. The ongoing practice of this connection with yourself generates a resilience that prepares you to face challenges with calm and confidence. Every experience, no matter how difficult, becomes an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to deepen the self-love you've so carefully cultivated. As your integrity rises, you open yourself to receive the love and abundance the universe is waiting to offer you. The energy you radiate attracts circumstances and people who resonate with your vibration, enabling relationships and experiences that enrich your journey and nourish your soul. This ongoing process of expansion and self-knowledge becomes an endless voyage, a constant invitation to explore and embrace every facet of your being. In that exploration, you discover the freedom to fully express yourself, without fear or masks, celebrating the beauty and complexity that make you unique. Thus, the self-love that is born from releasing inner pain becomes the very force that propels your evolution. a never-ending source of light and power that accompanies you every step of the way, guiding you toward complete fulfillment and deep harmony with the life you deserve to live. Every moment lived from that renewed self-love becomes a conscious act of creation, where your intention and presence merge to shape a reality more aligned with your essence. This ability to manifest with authenticity and clarity is the tangible result of the inner healing you've achieved by letting go of the pain that once imprisoned you. In this state of vibrational coherence, doubts and fears lose ground to the confidence that emerges from the depths of your being. Your inner voice becomes steady and compassionate, reminding you of your worth and standing by you in every decision, free from judgment or external pressure. This renewed relationship with yourself strengthens your integrity and creates space for a more conscious and fulfilling life. The effects of this transformation extend far beyond the personal. They ripple into every interaction, every relationship, and every project you take on. By radiating an energy that is authentic and balanced, you draw to yourself experiences and people who uplift and support your journey, forming a virtuous cycle of growth and expansion. This elevated vibration also opens the door to greater creativity and inspiration, allowing you to connect with inner and universal sources that enrich your expression and guide you toward new ways of being and creating. The connection with this creative force is a manifestation of self-love that has transcended the limits of suffering. The journey toward this complete integration is a continuous process of discovery and acceptance, where each step opens new possibilities and deepens your commitment to yourself. On this path, self-love becomes the light that guides your way, a constant presence that supports and nourishes your evolution toward authenticity and freedom. That renewed self-love translates into a vibration that touches every aspect of your life, from the smallest everyday decisions to the major life choices that shape your destiny. The inner coherence you've cultivated becomes a magnet that attracts experiences aligned with your essence, making way for a natural flow of well-being, abundance, and fulfillment. As this energy grows stronger, patience and compassion toward yourself become essential pillars. You begin to understand that spiritual and emotional growth isn't linear, but a dynamic process filled with progress, setbacks, and continuous lessons. This deep acceptance allows you to maintain a high vibration, even in moments of difficulty, by preserving the connection with your inner light. The presence of this loving energy also transforms the way you communicate with yourself and with others. Words gain a new kind of power, born from a place of respect and care. They become vehicles for strengthening self-esteem and nurturing healthy relationships. This new quality in your language reflects the coherence and authenticity you now embody. The self-love that emerges as you release inner pain also connects you with a broader dimension of awareness and purpose. You feel part of something greater, aligned with universal energies and forces that guide and sustain your evolution. This profound connection brings a sense of belonging and meaning that nourishes your soul and enriches your life experience. Every step in this journey is an invitation to deepen your relationship with yourself, to celebrate your achievements, and to embrace your shadows with equal love. The process of letting go, healing, and loving from a place of truth becomes the sacred dance that sustains your growth and leads you toward true fulfillment and authentic freedom. That ongoing embrace of your entire self, with all your light and darkness, allows you to live from a place of unshakable authenticity. A deep acceptance of who you are at every moment builds a solid foundation for forming more genuine and meaningful relationships, where vulnerability becomes a courageous act and love flows freely without expectations or conditions. The energy born from this self-love expresses itself as a presence that radiates calm and confidence, a vibration that naturally attracts those who are seeking authentic and resonant connections. There's no need to strive or force encounters. It's simply about being and allowing your essence to unfold with grace and power. In this space of integration and healing, life takes on a new meaning. Every experience, even the ones that once seemed painful or limiting, now reveals itself as an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to deepen your understanding of yourself and the world around you. The trust that arises from this connection with yourself enhances your ability to set healthy boundaries, communicate clearly, and act from a place of inner alignment. This balance strengthens your emotional and spiritual well-being, preparing you to face challenges with resilience and wisdom. The expansion that comes from living through authentic self-love opens doors to a deeper fulfillment, where inner peace and genuine joy walk beside you on your journey. This awakening is a call to honor and nurture that inner light, cultivating a life that reflects the greatness and beauty that have always lived within you. That inner expansion creates a resonance that impacts not only your personal world, but also the way you relate to your surroundings and community. The vibration you emit, rooted in self-love and acceptance, draws experiences that reflect and magnify that energy, supporting mutual growth and collective evolution. By cultivating this conscious presence, you learn to flow with the natural cycles of life, honoring the timing of each process and allowing transformation to unfold without rushing or resistance. This harmonious rhythm strengthens your connection with your true essence and brings you a sense of fulfillment that transcends the superficial. The daily practice of this deep love for yourself becomes a constant source of renewal and strength. It invites you to see each day as an opportunity to reaffirm your commitment to truth and authenticity, reminding you that the path to wholeness is a journey filled with learning, acceptance, and expansion. The effortless power of feminine energy finds its most genuine and potent expression in this self-love. From this solid foundation, every step you take becomes a conscious act of creation and manifestation, where your inner light guides and supports every movement with wisdom and grace. This process of transformation is an open invitation to all women seeking to reconnect with their essence, heal old wounds, and fully unleash their vibrational potential. It is a call to live from the heart, with courage and presence, embracing the wholeness of who you are and the strength you carry within. The resonance that flows from this state of authentic self-love has the power to deeply and lastingly influence your environment. As you remain in that energy, you create a vibrational field that inspires others to seek their own truth, igniting a ripple effect of healing and collective growth. This energetic exchange becomes an invisible thread that connects souls, encouraging a network of support and shared awakening. Respect for natural cycles and acceptance of personal rhythms allow inner transformation to unfold with patience and trust. This alignment with sacred time not only strengthens your emotional well-being, but also enhances your mental and spiritual clarity, enabling more conscious and purposeful decisions. Reaffirming your commitment to yourself each day is an act of love that nourishes your spirit and supports your evolution. This consistent practice helps you stay connected to your essence, even when external circumstances challenge your inner stability. Steadfastness on this path is key to fully integrating the light and the shadow that make up who you are. The power that stems from this self-love lies in its authenticity and its ability to manifest without effort or pretense. It's an energy that doesn't seek attention, but expresses itself through simplicity and truth, leaving a deep mark on those lucky enough to feel it. This collective awakening, driven by the feminine vibration in its highest form, is an invitation for all souls to reconnect with their inner power and walk together toward a higher consciousness. The expansion that arises from this union is the seed of a profound and lasting change that transcends generations and reshapes reality. Every step in this inner healing journey strengthens your ability to trust yourself and in life itself. By freeing yourself from suffering, you allow life to unfold with a renewed freshness, free from the burdens of the past and the doubts that once slowed your growth. This inner freedom becomes fertile ground where self-love blossoms and drives your evolution. In this state, your relationship with yourself becomes kind and compassionate. You learn to recognize your limits without judgment and celebrate your strengths without falling into arrogance. This balance lays the foundation for building solid self-esteem that doesn't rely on external validation, but grows from the honest recognition of your inherent worth. The self-love that is born from releasing pain also transforms the way you communicate, both internally and externally. Your inner voice softens, making space for words of encouragement and acceptance that strengthen your spirit. This inner shift is reflected in your relationships, where honesty and mutual respect create bonds that nourish and sustain. That internal transformation leads to a new way of inhabiting the world, where every interaction becomes a chance to express and reinforce that genuine love for yourself. The energy you emit from this deep self-acceptance creates a vibrational field that positively influences your environment, attracting experiences and people who resonate with that elevated frequency. The ability to sustain this unconditional self-love also boosts your emotional resilience, allowing you to face challenges with renewed calm and unwavering confidence. Instead of reacting from fear or insecurity, you learn to respond from a place of balance and inner wisdom, guided by the understanding that suffering does not define who you are. This new perspective invites you to care for yourself with tenderness and responsibility, establishing clear boundaries that protect your energy and well-being. Self-care becomes a sacred act, a tangible expression of the love you have for yourself to stay aligned with your path of growth. Moreover, the self-love that blooms after releasing pain fuels creativity and inspiration, making it easier to manifest dreams and goals that reflect your true essence. By connecting to this inner source, you discover a creative force that turns ideas into realities and guides you toward a more meaningful and fulfilling life. This expansive vibration also encourages a deeper connection to your intuition, reinforcing trust in your choices and aligning your actions with your soul's highest purpose. The clarity and serenity that arise from this inner state act like compasses, guiding each step and keeping you in tune with your most profound truth. That inner clarity reveals itself in a greater ability to discern what truly nourishes your soul and what distances you from your well-being. You learn to listen to the subtle signals from your body and mind, respecting their needs and natural rhythms. This mindful attention deepens your connection with the present moment and anchors you in a state of presence, which is the foundation of true self-love. The consistent practice of this self-listening and conscious care creates a virtuous cycle where energy constantly renews and expands. Each act of love toward yourself, no matter how small, becomes a building block in the creation of a strong and authentic self-esteem. This inner stability also frees you from rigid expectations and comparisons that once limited your growth. By releasing these burdens, you open up to radical acceptance that embraces both your virtues and imperfections, recognizing that both are integral to your humanity and unique beauty. The self-love that emerges from this process not only transforms your relationship with yourself, but also enriches the quality of your relationships with others. When you are at peace and aligned with yourself, you naturally attract connections rooted in respect, honesty, and genuine reciprocity. These are not superficial bonds. They are deep, soul-nourishing relationships that support your evolution and remind you of your inherent worth. In this space of harmony, compassion becomes one of your greatest tools, an energy that not only helps you forgive others, but most importantly, allows you to heal and grow within. When you turn that compassion inward, you begin to loosen the grip of harsh self-judgments and the silent punishments you've inflicted upon yourself over time. In doing so, you invite the light of unconditional love to reach every forgotten, shadowed corner of your being. There is a strength within you, a quiet power that has waited patiently beneath the surface, waiting for one sacred moment. The moment you choose to release the pain you've carried for far too long. This pain may have once served a purpose, but now it no longer defines you. Together, we've walked the path of self-love, not the kind painted by fleeting affirmations, but the kind born from a decision to stop surviving and begin living, to stop hiding and begin revealing who you truly are. When you embrace your essence with tenderness and courage, a powerful shift occurs. You begin to see yourself not as broken or incomplete, but as whole, as worthy, and as beautifully human. This awakening doesn't just shift your inner world, it radiates outward. It sends waves of peace into your surroundings. It touches the hearts of others, even in silence, even from a distance. You become a living reminder that healing is possible, that authenticity can thrive, and that love, real love, doesn't have to be earned, chased, or begged for. It already lives within you. Give yourself permission to live from that place, from that pure, unconditional love that lifts your spirit and nurtures your evolution. Every step you take from this place is a sacred act of devotion to yourself, to your journey, and to the life you are meant to live fully and freely. And if these words resonate with you, it's not by chance. It's because something deep within your soul already knew this truth. Something ancient, quiet, and wise inside of you has been waiting for this moment.